What's up, guys? Welcome to Hiking Homesteading. Good to have you back. We're in the basement of the log cabin, and we're going to do a video today on should you get a rooster? 5 things to consider. I say yes, but it kind of depends on your situation, so let's discuss. Okay, so number one, okay, crowing. Okay, again, this is why I didn't say 5 pros or 5 cons. I said 5 things to consider. Okay, crowing. For me, I love it. I love, they crow, but let me tell you this, they're going to crow all the time. Okay. They do traditionally crow at the crack of dawn in the mornings, like you see on the movies. Okay. I love hearing that in the morning. I pour my cup of coffee, the sun's coming up, I go sit on the porch, I look at the mountain view, watch the sunrise over the mountains, and I can hear some roosters crowing, and it is harmony to me. They also crow in the evenings. Okay, I like hearing that too. For eating dinner on the deck, you hear them crow. I like that. But they also crow all the time during the day. Not like constantly. Most of their crowing is like the movie show, early morning, evening. It's kind of like when the sun's coming up or it's getting dark. They're a little bit. I don't know why they do it, but anyways, crowing. So for me, it's a pro. I like hearing it. And when I go inside my house, like I said, we live in a log cabin. The logs are decut logs that are stacked about a foot thick of wood. So, needless to say, it's a bit of a sound barrier. We don't really hear the crowing in the actual cabin that much. So, if we want to get away from the annoying sound of the crow, we can. We also have on our homestead, our yard is right up against our house, and that's where our dog is at. We have a blue heeler, and he don't let no chickens in the yard. He keeps them herded out. So basically, what the plan I'm going to make is our chickens are out in the pasture, and therefore we don't hear the chickens crow. 2 reasons. One, we have a really thick wall. We have really thick log walls in our cabin that I feel like muffles any kind of sound from outside. Um, and then second reason is because they're out in the pasture a little bit further away from our house. They're not right up at our house crowing. But anyways, so crowing for me is a pro, but if you have neighbors, if you live in a neighborhood, if you have an HOA, if you have et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, there's lots of circumstances where you don't want to hear a rooster crow or people around you don't want to hear a rooster crow. I usually just keep a few roosters because I don't really like to hear a bunch of roosters crow. So just something to consider as well. So crowing, something to consider. You may love it, you may hate it, you may love it, but your neighbors may hate it. Okay, so we don't really have close neighbors. We just have a couple acres of land, but everybody around us has lots of land, and they also have livestock as well, roosters, etc. So it's not really an issue. But anyway, second thing is protection. And when we talk about protection, there's multiple types of protection here. One, they will obviously protect against predators. Okay, and the way they do that is it's not like a rooster can actually take on a fox or a coon, but they sacrifice themselves. Okay, they are loyal to their flock, and they will put themselves out into battle, even though they'll lose to most predators, just to protect their hens. So hens obviously inherently carry more value, so because they lay eggs. So you're still going to lose chickens to predators, but most time the rooster will sacrifice himself. And he's also a little bit more alert, so sometimes he'll see aerial predators before hens will, and he'll crow, which is another thing. A rooster's a really good alarm dog. He'll crow to warn you of predators coming on the homestead and to warn the hens. So when he crows, the hens will go into shelter, and then he'll follow behind them, and then you can come out if you hear it. You can come out and kind of see what's going on. So he's a good alarm animal and a good protector. Okay. He also protects the hens from themselves. Okay. Hens tend to get there's always a pecking order, and hens get, just like girls can do sometimes, they get in little tussles with each other, and there's sometimes hens have a lot of drama for whatever reason, and the rooster really helps moderate that. He really prevents hens from getting in really bad fights. And what I've found when I haven't had a rooster, there's usually an alpha hen that kind of steps into that role, and she's like a really mean hen. I've actually had a hen before that was meaner than any rooster I've ever owned. So when people tell you roosters are mean and be careful about getting roosters, listen, the meanest chicken I've ever had was a hen, and that thing was mean. So anyways, roosters are great for protecting. And they're actually usually really friendly with people. If you handle them a lot and stuff, they're actually usually friendlier than the hens are. That's what I found. We handle ours a fair amount, and they tend to be friendlier with us than the hens do. Unless you got a Bantam rooster, they have a little man syndrome, and they can have a little bit of a bad attitude sometimes. But most medium to large size roosters are fine. Third thing to consider is reproduction. They are going to breed your hens. This breeds pros and cons. Breeds, I get it. It breeds pros and cons. So one is if you have a really small flock and they are overbreeding your hens, they will actually, or sometimes for whatever reason, a rooster just prefers one hen. Even if you have like 20 hens, sometimes a rooster really wants one hen. And they breed a certain hen too much. They jump on their back. They rake a bunch of their feathers off. They cause a little bit of damage in the breeding. So if it's every so often, it's not a big deal. But if they overbreed your hens due to a small flock, or they just have a thing for one certain hen that you have, it can hurt your hens. But on the flip side of that, you can get fertilized eggs, and if you have a broody hen, you can put those eggs under her. She can sit on them, she can hatch them, and you have a self-sustaining flock. So that's something to consider. Reproduction, pro and con. Con is they can hurt your hens. Pro, you can have a self-sustaining flock. All right, let's go to the next one. Fourth, beauty. Okay, I think roosters are really pretty. Hens aren't as pretty. Roosters get the big curled tail feathers. They have all these colors, and their feathers blossom with the sheen in the sun, and they just kind of strut around. And they're really cool animals to have in a homestead. I love my roosters. I love my hens for food, but I love my roosters more as, I don't know, just more of a personal connection to roosters because they are prettier animals. Um, anyways, so beauty, that one's simple. But number 5 for us is just other things to consider, kind of some cons to them that you might have to worry about. One is, again, the size of your flock. If you have a really small flock, you probably don't want a rooster. You probably usually want at least 6 to 8 birds where you have rooster in there. Look at what it says for breed. Different breeds recommend certain ratios of rooster to hens. Sometimes it's 1 rooster to 8 hens. Sometimes it's 1 to 12 hens. It just kind of depends. But anyways, if you have a really small flock, you may not want to introduce a rooster. Second thing is overbreeding. We touched on this earlier. Sometimes if you have a small flock, or if they just prefer one hen, they'll kind of mount the hen too much, and they will tear a bunch of her feathers off and hurt the hen. So just be aware of that. That can be an issue sometimes. Another thing is fighting. Sometimes if you have a couple roosters, they will fight a lot. I found if you have a small rooster and a big rooster, they kind of easily establish the pecking order, and it's not a big deal, and they don't fight much after that. But if you have 2 roosters the same size, they really just go at it all the time, and they can actually kill each other. So you have to be a little careful about that. If you raise them from when they're chicks together, they're fine because they've established the pecking order early. But if you bring in a medium-sized rooster and you've already had a medium-sized rooster, you're eventually going to have to let them duke it out, and sometimes it gets ugly. Okay, so that's just something to consider as well. They also, most of my roosters have been good to my kids, but I have had one that would flog my kids. Okay, in the past. Rest in peace to that rooster. But anyways, you do have to worry about that. They will sometimes get a mean streak in them and flog you. Now, for somebody like me, that's fine. I give them a backhand. Sorry if you think that's cruel. But if you have little kids in your homestead, that can be an issue, okay? Neighbors is another thing to consider. You know, if you have close neighbors, they probably aren't a fan of a rooster. So rooster's one of those things, you probably need more land to own a rooster than you do some small breeds of goats. They're a homestead animal that kind of needs some space, just because your neighbors, if they're on top of you, they may not want to hear a rooster crow. It may annoy them. So anyways, those are just all things to consider. Overall, I recommend roosters. If you have a situation where you can have a rooster, I would have a rooster. I always keep a rooster in my flock. I highly recommend them for several reasons. But anyways, that's my take on it. Thank you guys for watching the video. Like, subscribe to the video, hit the notification bell, and wait, I want to show you guys a rooster. Hold on a second. So this is our rooster, one of our roosters. This is Morgan Wallen right here, which is another fun thing about roosters. You can give them fun names. So this is Morgan Wallen. He is a Lavender Orpington rooster. So he's a good medium-sized rooster. You can see he's got the bigger feathers around his neck, also the curled tail feathers. I'll show you his rooster, and he's got spurs on his back claws. But he's pretty friendly. We hold him quite a bit. We also have one that's a black Australorp that we'd use more for breeding. Morgan Wallen is more of just our pretty rooster. But anyways, roosters, they're great animals to have in homestead. Like, subscribe, keep watching the videos. Thanks, guys, and we'll talk to you guys later.